The fluorescent lights of Terminal 4 buzzed faintly overhead. Announcements echoed across the hall, bouncing off cold tile and glass. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. A man cursed under his breath at the delay board. But in a quiet corner near Gate B31, just beneath the tall windows overlooking the tarmac, Naomi Beale wasn't sleeping. She was surviving. She sat on the floor, back pressed against a wall that did nothing to shield her from the draft seeping in through the glass. Her coat, thin and damp, was stretched over two small sleeping bodies. Zuri and Malik, her 6-year-old twins, curled up against her sides, their faces nestled into her ribs, their tiny breaths fogging the collar of her shirt. Her eyes were closed, but not in rest. Sleep hadn't visited her in nearly 2 days. The weight of exhaustion pressed down on her chest like something physical, something heavy and cruel. Her stomach gnawed at itself, the hunger now dull and distant, like a warning bell she no longer had the strength to answer. Her lips were cracked, throat dry, but she kept still for them. They hadn't eaten since the morning before. Just half a granola bar each. She'd split it carefully, made it a game, told them they were on a space mission and rations were limited. Zuri had giggled. Malik had nodded solemnly like a soldier. They never complained. That was the part that broke her the most. They never asked for more, never cried, never questioned why their world had suddenly shrunk to a backpack, a wet blanket, in the corner of an airport terminal. They trusted her, blindly. Outside the window, planes taxied under white halos of light. Inside, people rushed by, clutching neck pillows, Starbucks cups, and rolling carry-ons. A few glanced at her. Most looked away. One man actually stopped, took a photo on his phone, then walked off with a smirk. She had become scenery, an inconvenient reminder that not everyone flying out of JFK had somewhere to return to. The twins stirred beneath the coat. Zuri mumbled in her sleep, something about a garden. Malik curled tighter, clutching the corner of her scarf. Naomi reached down and gently tucked it around his chin, her fingers trembling. Not from cold. She was beyond cold, but from helplessness. How had it come to this? A week ago, she'd still had a room. A job. Not much, but enough. Enough to keep her children warm, to send them to school, to buy apples and rice. She'd made it work, until it all unraveled. So fast, too fast for her to catch any of it before it slipped through her fingers like water. And now here she was. No home, no money, no phone, no flight. Just this corner, and the sound of strangers' lives moving on without her. She looked down at her children again. Their socks didn't match. Zuri's hat was unraveling. Malik's little shoes had holes in the soles. She'd stitched them twice already. They still smiled. Still laughed when she made faces. Still sang the silly songs she'd made up in Nairobi years ago when she'd first brought them home. Home. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if the word itself hurt. Nairobi felt like another life. She had left it with dreams, promises. She would go to America, earn real money, give her children a future. They would never know hunger again, never sleep on the floor, never feel invisible. The irony of that last promise stung the most. She leaned her head back against the glass. It was freezing. Her eyes burned. She blinked them open and stared up at the ceiling, willing herself not to cry. A soft voice whispered from her side. "Mommy." "Zuri." Naomi looked down quickly. "Yes, baby. I'm not cold anymore," the girl said, still half asleep. Naomi swallowed. "That's good." Zuri nestled closer. "Because you're here." Naomi's throat tightened. She nodded silently, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. She couldn't cry. Not in front of them. Not when they needed her to be strong. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not to them. To herself. To God. To the world that let it come to this. She had tried. She had tried so hard. Footsteps approached. Naomi didn't look up. She'd learned not to expect kindness from strangers in airports. But these steps stopped. Right in front of her. She held her breath. Then came a familiar voice. "Naomi." Her heart stuttered. No, it couldn't be. Slowly, hesitantly, she opened her eyes. A tall man stood before her. Designer suit. Polished shoes. Briefcase in one hand. Shock on his face. Jonathan Blake. Her former employer. The man who had never once asked her about her life. The man who had watched as his wife accused her of theft, said nothing, and allowed security to escort her out like trash. She froze. His eyes fell to the children. Recognition flickered. "He started. Naomi pulled her coat tighter around the twins. Her voice was hoarse, but firm. Don't. He took a small step back, as if her pain had a force of its own. I didn't know, he said. She laughed. Dry, bitter. You didn't care to. Silence hung between them, deafening in the noise of the terminal. I'm sorry, he said. Naomi looked at him. Really looked. For the first time in years. Not her boss. Not a man in a suit. Just a person. A flawed, guilty, haunted man. And somehow, that made it worse. Because if he was human, then he had no excuse. She turned her face away. Go, she whispered. But he didn't. Naomi hadn't meant to remember. But as she sat in that airport corner, coat wrapped around her children, face turned away from the man who once let her dignity be stripped away, memory surged like a tide, unstoppable, flooding every part of her. The night she found them had been just as cold. Nairobi. 6 years ago. The rainy season. Thunder cracked across the slums of Kibera like a warning shot. Naomi had been walking home from the clinic after a long shift volunteering. She was 25 then, fresh out of nursing school, idealistic and tired in equal measure. The muddy streets were lit only by flickering bulbs and the occasional fire pit. The stench of damp earth and sewage clung to the air. She was halfway through the narrow alley that led to her rented room when she heard it. Crying. Faint. Weak. But real. She stopped, clutched her satchel tighter, looked around. Then she heard it again. 2 cries. Not one. Instinct overrode reason. She followed the sound, turning into a shadowed side path that smelled of rot and rain. Behind a rusted metal bin, partially covered by a tattered shawl, was a cardboard box. She knelt. Inside were 2 infants. Naked, trembling, umbilical cords barely healed. Their skin was ice cold, eyes shut, faces scrunched in silent agony. For a moment, Naomi couldn't move. Then training kicked in. She stripped off her sweater and wrapped them quickly. Checked their breathing. Both were alive, barely. Dehydrated. Starving. Malnourished. She looked around. No note. No sign of who had left them. Just a box in the alley. Someone had abandoned them like trash. She picked them up. 1 in each arm. Stood. And walked. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She took them home. Her flatmate stared in horror when she arrived. You can't just bring babies home off the street, Naomi. But Naomi didn't respond. She was already warming water. Already cleaning the infants with a washcloth. Already boiling formula she'd been saving. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat between the 2, watching their tiny chests rise and fall, waiting for a breath to stop. It didn't. By morning, they had names. Zuri, for beauty. Malik, for strength. The government wouldn't help. No paperwork. No identification. They weren't even registered. No one wanted to claim them. No one wanted to investigate. It was easier to forget the forgotten. So Naomi remembered. She made it her mission. The days were brutal. Her nursing job paid little. Formula was expensive. Diapers, doctor visits, vaccinations, all uphill battles. She pawned jewelry, skipped meals, borrowed what she could. But she kept them fed, held them when they cried, sang to them in Swahili, and whispered stories of stars and cities. When they smiled, her exhaustion vanished. When they laughed, the world softened. They were not hers by blood, but they were hers by choice. And that made the bond stronger than any biology ever could. But love didn't pay rent. By the time the twins were 2, Nairobi's cost of living had crushed Naomi's dreams. The clinic closed. Jobs disappeared. The landlord raised her rent. She stood on the roof of her building one night, watching the lights flicker across the slums, and felt the weight of reality settle in. She couldn't raise them here. Not like this. When she heard about the domestic worker program in the U.S., she hesitated. The idea of leaving was unbearable. But the idea of staying, watching the twins grow up hungry and unseen, was worse. She applied. It took months. Interviews. Paperwork. Long nights of doubt. When the approval finally came, she cried for 2 hours. Not from joy. From fear. She had never been on a plane. Never left Kenya. But she sold everything she owned, kissed the twins goodbye, and promised them she'd return. A job in New York. A live-in position. Full-time housekeeper. It sounded dignified on paper. It wasn't. But she endured it. For them. Every dollar she earned went back home. Every month she sent boxes, clothes, books, medicine. Every night, she called, even if just to hear their breath. She missed first steps. First words. first birthdays. But when she returned for a short visit 2 years later, they ran into her arms, still calling her Mama. That was enough. When she brought them to America later, after fighting through visa paperwork and endless bureaucracy, it felt like a miracle. Naomi had made it. Her little family was whole. And then, just like that, it shattered again. Her throat tightened as she looked at them now, asleep beneath her coat. Zuri had kicked one sock off. Malik's nose was pink from cold. They looked so small, so breakable. She adjusted the coat again. Naomi. Jonathan's voice pulled her back into the present. He was still there, still standing awkwardly, eyes wide with something that looked too much like regret to be fake. She didn't want his regret. She wanted time. She wanted dignity. She wanted justice. But those were too heavy to ask for here, on this cold airport floor. He stepped closer. Are they yours? She looked at him, eyes tired. They're mine, she said simply. More than anything I've ever had. He looked down. I remember seeing their picture. On your locker door. I never asked about them. You never asked about anything, Naomi said. Silence stretched. I didn't know how, he admitted. You didn't want to. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's true. Zuri stirred again. Naomi gently rocked her, whispering a lullaby that had no words, only melody. Jonathan knelt down. I have a hotel room nearby, he said quietly. 2 beds. Heat. A shower. Food. For them. For you. Naomi stared at him. Suspicion flared. I'm not asking for anything, he added. Just, let me do the bare minimum. She looked down at the children, then back at him. I don't need charity. It's not charity, he said. It's shame. And maybe a little bit of decency, finally. She didn't speak. But when Malik whimpered, curling tighter into her, Naomi made a decision. Not for Jonathan. For them. Help me stand, she whispered. He reached out a hand. She didn't take it. But she stood. And for the first time in a long time, she took a step forward. The hotel room was warm, but Naomi couldn't stop shivering. Not from cold, though her body was still thawing from the icy floor of the terminal, but from something deeper. Nerves, maybe. Distrust. Or just the jarring contrast between the sterile luxury of the suite and the chaos that had consumed her life in the past weeks. She sat on the edge of the queen-sized bed, her coat still wrapped around the twins, even though the central heating purred softly in the background. Zuri and Malik had fallen asleep again almost immediately after the bath Jonathan had arranged for them, their bellies full of chicken nuggets and warm apple slices. They looked peaceful now, almost glowing under the golden light of the room's chandelier. But Naomi could not rest. She watched them, hand hovering protectively above their little bodies, her eyes never leaving them. She had lived through too many nights of uncertainty to let her guard down now. Even in a room with soft sheets, thick carpets, and soundproofed windows. Jonathan Blake had stepped out, promising to return with some essentials. She hadn't asked what. She hadn't asked anything. She still wasn't sure why she had agreed to follow him at all. The weight of the day sat heavy on her shoulders. And as silence pressed in around her, memory returned, like it always did. The house in Manhattan had never been a home. Not for her. It had been a monument to control. She remembered the first time she saw it. Tall white pillars, double glass doors, marble floors polished to a mirror shine. The housekeeper agency had spoken of it like a dream posting. Private room, live-in, competitive pay, upscale family. What they hadn't said was that it would come with rules more suffocating than any uniform. Naomi's room was in the basement, near the laundry. Small, windowless, and cold. But she hadn't complained. She'd come for a reason. To build a future for Zuri and Malik. To endure. To sacrifice. To send every spare dollar home. From day one, she learned what was expected. Silence. Efficiency. Obedience. Jonathan rarely spoke to her. He was always behind a phone or a laptop, pacing in and out of conference calls. When he did speak, it was polite, distant. Sometimes he thanked her for a task well done. Sometimes he forgot she was there. Vanessa Blake, however, never forgot. She was impossible to please. Always watching, always finding something wrong. Naomi folded towels too loosely. She made eye contact too long. She hummed while ironing. Her presence seemed to irritate Vanessa on a molecular level. Don't touch the piano, she once said, sharply, when Naomi tried to dust it. I wasn't going to play it, Naomi had replied, startled. I didn't ask what you were going to do. I said don't touch it. She kept to herself after that. The only joy she had was in the small moments, slipping letters and photos from Zuri and Malik under her pillow, reading them at night under a dim lamp. Sometimes she'd hum them the same lullabies over video calls, careful not to let Vanessa hear. There was a small corkboard near the laundry room. She'd tacked a photo of the twins there, behind a mop bucket, where no one looked. It was her anchor, her reminder. You're not just a servant. You're a mother. You're building something. But the house had its own way of stripping identity away. She was the help. She was the girl. Never Naomi. Never a person with a story, with children, with dreams. She was expected to vanish behind closed doors when guests arrived, to eat after everyone else had finished, to wear the plainest clothes. No jewelry, no perfume, no expression. One time, she had laughed a little too loud at something she overheard in the kitchen. Vanessa had walked in, eyes narrow. Is something funny? Naomi had swallowed her voice. No, ma'am. You're here to work, not to socialize. Yes, ma'am. And that had been that. She'd started folding napkins into swans just to feel like she was still allowed a shred of creativity. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Then came the necklace. It vanished one Thursday afternoon. A diamond choker, rarely worn but loudly cherished. Vanessa was furious. She stormed through the house, throwing open drawers, demanding answers. Jonathan watched from the corner, phone in hand, expression unreadable. I don't want to accuse anyone, Vanessa had said, though she very much did. But we've only had one person in this house unsupervised. Her eyes had landed on Naomi. I didn't take anything, Naomi had said, her voice calm, steady. There's no need to get defensive, Vanessa had snapped. I'm not being defensive. I'm telling the truth. Jonathan had looked up briefly, then back at his phone. Security was called. They searched her room, her bag, her laundry bin. Nothing. But the damage was done. She was asked to leave the house immediately. No paycheck. No warning. No dignity. The necklace was found days later, in their daughter's playroom. She had taken it, trying to play dress up like mommy. No apology followed. No one called Naomi. No one said they were wrong. And now, that man, the man who had stood by silently as her life crumbled, was offering her a warm room and a meal. She should have refused. But Zuri and Malik had needed the warmth. Now they needed sleep. And she needed answers. The door clicked open. Jonathan entered, carrying a shopping bag. I got some shoes for the kids, he said softly, placing them by the door. Some toiletries. A few clothes. Naomi didn't thank him. Instead, she stood. Why now, she asked. He looked at her, startled. What do you mean? You let her accuse me. You said nothing. You watched me leave. Why now? He hesitated, then sat on the chair across from the bed. I don't know. That's not good enough. I know. His voice was low. I think I was scared, he said. Scared of conflict. Of my wife. Of what it would mean to question her. I let convenience guide me. I saw the truth, and I walked away from it. Naomi crossed her arms. You didn't walk away. You pushed me out. He nodded. I did. Silence. Then, I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he said. I'm here because I saw you tonight and realized. I never saw you before. Not really. Naomi looked at her sleeping children. Then maybe this is your chance, she said quietly, to finally open your eyes. The day it all fell apart had started like any other. Naomi had woken early, before sunrise, moving silently through the grand kitchen of the Blake residence. She brewed coffee just the way Vanessa liked it. Dark roast, splash of almond milk, 2 ice cubes. Breakfast was prepped with precision. Avocado toast with poached eggs for Jonathan, organic yogurt parfaits for their daughter, cinnamon toast for Vanessa, crust trimmed. By 7, the house hummed with its daily routine. Doors opened, voices echoed, phones buzzed. Naomi moved like a shadow through it all. Present, necessary, but invisible. At 8:13 a.m., the screaming started. Vanessa's voice, sharp as glass, tore through the hallway. My necklace. My necklace is gone. Naomi froze mid-step, holding a towel. For a moment, the house fell silent, as if waiting for the explosion. It came moments later. Footsteps stormed down the stairs. Vanessa entered the kitchen, eyes wild, fury radiating from her in waves. I placed it on my dresser last night. It's not there. Who touched it? Naomi stayed still, confused. Mrs. Blake, I haven't been upstairs today. I cleaned the bedroom yesterday morning, as scheduled. I didn't ask for a timeline, Vanessa snapped. I asked who touched it. I wouldn't touch your jewelry, Naomi said, careful to keep her voice even. Jonathan entered then, tie half done, looking between them. What's going on? She took it, Vanessa said flatly, pointing at Naomi. It's the only explanation. Jonathan blinked. Vanessa, let's not jump to. There's no jumping, Jonathan. She's the only outsider with access. Naomi's heart pounded. Sir, I didn't steal anything. Jonathan looked at her, but only for a second. Then he looked away. You searched the drawers? He asked his wife. Yes, thoroughly. Maybe it fell. Maybe our daughter took it again. She's played with your things before. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. So now you're blaming Lily? I'm not blaming. I'm just saying. This is typical. You never take me seriously. Naomi stood frozen, towel still in her hand. It felt absurd, surreal. The accusation hung in the air, as heavy as the diamond choker itself. I'm not a thief, she said softly. Vanessa ignored her. I want her room searched, she told Jonathan. All of it. Now. Jonathan hesitated. That seems unnecessary. Unnecessary? She's living in our house. Security was called. Naomi's room, her tiny, windowless basement, was ransacked. Her bags were emptied, her drawers overturned. The photo of Zuri and Malik was torn in the process, the corner ripped clean off. The shame flooded in, cold and corrosive. Nothing was found. Not the necklace. Not a trace. But it didn't matter. The seed had been planted. The suspicion fed on silence. Vanessa crossed her arms. She's smart. Probably mailed it already. Or hid it off-site. Naomi stared at her. I have nothing to hide. Vanessa's lips curled. That's what thieves always say. Jonathan said nothing. Naomi turned to him. You know me. I've worked here for almost 2 years. I've never. His eyes avoided hers. I think it's best we let you go. That was it. No investigation. No due process. No kindness. Just a quiet sentence, delivered with corporate detachment. Let you go. Not even fired. Just released. As if she were a faulty product. She packed in silence. Not because she agreed, but because she had no choice. The contract she signed with the agency allowed for immediate dismissal at the employer's discretion. She had no legal recourse. No safety net. She folded her uniforms, placed her few belongings in the duffel bag she'd brought from Nairobi. The ripped photo of her children went on top. She taped it back together with scotch tape from the kitchen drawer. Vanessa didn't offer her a ride. Jonathan didn't walk her out. She left the same way she arrived, quietly, invisibly, through the service door. It had started to rain. Of course it had. She stood on the sidewalk outside the Upper East Side townhouse, the cold seeping through her shoes, the duffel digging into her shoulder, and felt a numbness take over. She had been thrown out, like trash, with less dignity than she'd shown the dirty dishes in their sink. That night, she didn't have a place to go. Her friend in Brooklyn was already housing 2 cousins. The shelter in Harlem was full. She rode the subway for hours, looping the city until the last train ran. She didn't cry. There wasn't room for it. In the days that followed, she tried to find work. But the agency dropped her without explanation. Word traveled fast in their circles. A disloyal or untrustworthy worker was blacklisted silently. She sold the watch she'd received from her father. Then the coat she brought from home. By the end of the week, she had enough for a single motel night and 2 bus passes. The only thing she never sold was the photo. She never would. She kept it in her pocket, folded neatly. A reminder. You're not what they say. You are still a mother. Still Naomi. When she saw the cheap standby ticket to Nairobi, it felt like fate. She could go back. Start over. No shame. No lies. No polished houses built on hollow morality. She used the last of her savings to buy it. It wasn't confirmed, but it was something. She gathered Zuri and Malik, packed what little they had, and headed for JFK. But the flight was delayed. Then canceled. No vouchers. No refunds. The airline apologized to everyone else. Not to her. She found a corner by the window, wrapped the twins in the thinnest blanket she owned, and waited. They didn't cry. They never did. She wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. And then, of course, he showed up. Jonathan Blake. Offering warmth, food, help. Too little. Too late. She looked over at her children now, tucked into the hotel bed, and felt a familiar ache in her chest. She had tried to give them the world, and the world had taken everything back. But still, she was here, and they were sleeping. Warm. Safe. Maybe, just maybe, that meant something. Even if no one else saw her, she still saw them, and she would never stop fighting for them. The weeks after Naomi left the Blake townhouse blurred into a gray stretch of survival. Days bled into nights without meaning. Her phone battery had died within 2 days, and without a charger or an address to receive calls, it didn't matter much anyway. She'd used a payphone to contact her friend Asha in Brooklyn, who let her and the twins sleep on a floor mattress for 3 nights. 3 grateful, cramped, awkward nights surrounded by noise, bodies, and the tension of too many people in too small a space. Asha had been kind, but not endlessly. She had a toddler of her own, a 3rd job waiting to be picked up, and a landlord breathing down her neck. On the 4th night, Asha sat Naomi down. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You know I love you, but I can't keep risking this lease." Naomi didn't argue. She simply nodded and gathered her things. She understood. It wasn't about love. It was about survival. Everyone was drowning in their own way. The next night, she slept in a women's shelter near Hunts Point. It was loud, bright, and filled with tension. Malik clung to her shirt the whole night, flinching in his sleep. Zuri asked why the other women were shouting. Naomi didn't have an answer. She applied for jobs in the days that followed. Grocery stores, restaurants, cleaning services, even a laundromat. Most places didn't call back. A few did, but when she explained she didn't have a current address or a phone, the tone shifted immediately. "Sorry, we're not hiring anymore." One woman asked flatly, "Weren't you the nanny for the Blakes? I heard they let someone go." Naomi didn't answer. She turned and walked away before she could break. One by one, her options vanished. She pawned the last of her jewelry, a thin gold chain her mother had given her when she turned 18. It barely fetched enough for a few days of food and bus fare. She fed the twins first. Always first. They never noticed she skipped meals. Or if they did, they never said so. One morning, Naomi caught her reflection in a shop window. She didn't recognize herself. Hollow cheeks, cracked lips, sunken eyes. Her scarf was fraying. Her coat had a tear in the hem. She had gone from proud to invisible in under a month. The only place that didn't require paperwork, references, or a phone number was a nearby church that gave out sandwiches twice a week. She lined up with dozens of others. Older women, men in stained coats, teenagers with empty backpacks. Each time, she told herself this was temporary, just until something opened up. Something never did. She spent 3 days riding the subway with the kids to stay warm. She learned which lines ran all night, which stations had security that turned a blind eye, which exits had benches wide enough to let Malik and Zuri sleep side by side. At one point, she considered calling the agency back, just to beg. But then she remembered the look on Vanessa's face as security pulled her out. The silence of Jonathan. The way her children watched, confused and frightened, as she was treated like a criminal. No, she couldn't go back. One evening, Zuri looked up at her as they sat outside a closed bodega, sharing a cup of instant noodles. "Mommy, when are we going home?" Naomi didn't answer right away, because she didn't know what home meant anymore. Later that night, while using the public library restroom to wash her children's faces, Naomi saw the flyer. It was taped to the mirror, partly torn, nearly falling off. A cheap airline was offering standby tickets to Nairobi. One way, low fare, no luggage included. It felt like fate, or desperation, or both. She didn't hesitate. She scraped together every dollar she had left, walked for 2 hours to avoid subway fare, and bought the ticket in person. 1 adult, 2 children. The flight was in 48 hours. She didn't tell the kids right away. She waited until they were tucked under a borrowed blanket on the floor of a friend's studio apartment. She whispered it between their soft breaths. "We're going home," she said. They smiled in their sleep. Naomi spent the next 2 days gathering what little they had left, a spare shirt for each child, 2 granola bars, their toothbrushes, the photos she'd taped together months ago. Everything fit into one backpack. They arrived at JFK exhausted but hopeful. It was the first time in weeks Naomi had felt something close to relief. They waited at the gate. The airline agent gave her a tired smile. "You're standby, right? Just hang tight. If there's room, we'll board you." She nodded. The kids played quietly on the floor with a set of broken crayons. Hours passed. The flight was delayed. Then delayed again. Then canceled. "Weather," they said. No voucher. No rebooking for at least 2 days. Naomi stared at the woman behind the counter, blinking through her exhaustion. "There's nothing else." The woman looked apologetic. I'm sorry. You can try again tomorrow. But we have nowhere to go. The woman's face didn't change. Naomi didn't argue. She took the twins by the hand and walked to a quiet corner of the terminal. Same glass wall. Same cold floor. Same endless noise of lives moving forward without her. She laid down her blanket. Zuri curled into her side. Malik followed. They didn't complain. Naomi didn't sleep. She stared out at the tarmac, blinking back tears. She had tried. She had done everything she could. And yet, here they were. Still stranded. Still invisible. Still holding on. It started with footsteps. Naomi heard them long before she saw anything. Sharp, deliberate, echoing across the polished airport floor with the kind of confidence she had long since stopped recognizing in herself. People in airports moved fast. Most barely looked down. Most passed without a second glance. But these footsteps stopped. Right in front of her. She didn't open her eyes. She assumed it was security. Or maybe another traveler trying to find a place to sit. She had positioned herself and the twins against the window, far from the main path, hoping to avoid attention. But the feet didn't move. And then, a voice, low, hesitant, familiar. Naomi. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure whether the exhaustion was finally making her hallucinate. But it was him, Jonathan Blake, standing there in a tailored black coat, briefcase in hand, sleek shoes reflecting the sterile airport light. His hair was slightly grayer than she remembered, but the rest of him was unchanged. Still polished. Still in control. Still the man who had let her walk into the rain with 2 children and no justice. She froze. Her entire body tensed. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Forgot the cold beneath her. Forgot the twins asleep on her lap. All she saw was him. The past, wrapped in fine wool and expensive regret. His face shifted. Shock. Recognition. Something like guilt. He looked down at the children, tucked under her coat. He remembered them. Of course he did. He had seen their photo once, on that corkboard near the laundry. He had asked no questions back then. Had said nothing. But now he saw them for real. Naomi instinctively pulled the blanket tighter around them. Don't, she said, her voice hoarse. Please don't. Jonathan blinked, taken aback. Naomi, I didn't expect. He stopped himself. Are you okay? She almost laughed. Was she okay? She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. She had no money. No home. Her flight was gone. Her children were sleeping on a blanket in an airport terminal. And now, the man who helped orchestrate her downfall was standing over her, looking surprised to see that she hadn't simply disappeared. I'm fine, she said flatly. Jonathan knelt down slowly, his coat brushing the floor. I didn't know you were here. I was flying out for a conference. I saw you, and he trailed off. What happened? She looked him straight in the eyes for the first time since that day. You happened, she said quietly. He flinched. Zuri stirred beneath the blanket. Naomi shifted to soothe her without breaking eye contact. Jonathan looked down again at the children, his brow furrowing. These are my children, Naomi said. Yes. He swallowed hard. I remember the picture. I should have asked. I should have known. But you didn't, she replied. Silence. Around them, the airport continued its endless motion. Announcements, laughter, footsteps, boarding calls. No one noticed them. No one saw this quiet, tense scene unfolding between a man in a $1,000 suit and a woman on the floor with her life in a bag. I'm sorry, Jonathan said finally. Naomi blinked, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or scream. Are you? She asked. He looked up. Yes. She searched his face, looking for signs of insincerity. But she didn't see arrogance. Not this time. She saw confusion, shame, maybe even something close to fear. What are you sorry for? She asked. For not speaking up, he said. For letting her accuse you. For letting you go. For not asking questions. For being a coward. Naomi didn't answer. Zuri shifted again, whispering, Mommy, in her sleep. Jonathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. But instead of walking away, he looked at Naomi and said, Come with me. She blinked. What? There's a hotel across the street. I'll book a room for you. 2 rooms, actually. One for you and the kids, one for me. Just for the night. You shouldn't be sleeping here. She stared at him. Hard. Is this pity? She asked. No, he said quickly. It's responsibility. You think a hotel room makes up for what you did? No, he said again. It doesn't. Nothing will. But this isn't about making up for anything. It's just about doing the next right thing. Please, let me do that. Naomi looked down at the twins, still asleep, cheeks flushed from cold. She felt their breath, warm but shallow, against her skin. Then she looked back at Jonathan, still kneeling, still waiting. She hated him. She hated how easily he had moved on, how comfortable he still looked in his success, while she had fallen through the cracks of the very system he benefited from. But she wasn't doing this for him. She was doing it for them. She nodded, slowly. Fine, she said. But don't talk to me unless I ask you to. He stood, visibly relieved. Understood. She gathered the twins carefully, one arm around each. They stirred but didn't wake. Jonathan took her bag. She didn't offer it. He just picked it up. Together, they walked through the terminal, an odd trio. The man who once overlooked her, the woman he failed, and the children who still carried hope, even in sleep. Outside, the wind hit her like a slap. But then the heat of the waiting car enveloped her, and for the first time in days, her fingers began to feel warm again. As they pulled away from the curb, Naomi didn't look back at the terminal. There was nothing left behind her worth remembering. Only forward. Only the next choice. The hotel room was quiet, too quiet. Naomi sat by the window, wrapped in a robe that didn't belong to her, sipping tea she didn't ask for. The twins were asleep again, this time on a bed soft enough to make them disappear into the blankets. They hadn't stirred once since arriving, exhaustion pulling them under like deep water. Jonathan was in the room across the hall. She knew because she had insisted on 2 rooms, and he had agreed without protest. But now he was knocking. She hesitated, then opened the door. He stood there with 2 paper bags. Food, he said. I didn't know what they'd like, so I got options. Fries, rice, fruit, juice. She stepped aside without a word. He placed the bags on the small table, glancing once at the sleeping children. Do you need anything else? He asked. Naomi sat. You said this isn't charity. It's not. Then what is it? He didn't answer right away. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe shame. Maybe guilt. Maybe both. Naomi raised an eyebrow. You're honest now, she said. I'm trying. She nodded slowly, then said, that day, when she accused me, I washed your face. You didn't even look surprised. Jonathan swallowed. I wasn't. Vanessa always looked for someone to blame when something went wrong. I'd seen it so many times, I stopped questioning it. And when she pointed at me, I looked at you and thought, maybe she's right. Naomi flinched. Jonathan leaned forward. And I hated myself the second I thought it. Naomi's voice was tight. But you still said nothing. I know. You stood there and let me be searched. Let them tear through my room. You didn't stop them. I didn't, he said quietly. She stared at him. I lost everything because of that silence. He didn't argue. I couldn't get another job. I was blacklisted. I lived in shelters. My children slept on the subway. All because you couldn't look your wife in the eye and say, no. She didn't do it. I know, he said again, softer this time. I sold my last piece of jewelry to feed them. I borrowed bus fare to get to an interview I never got. I bought a one-way ticket to Nairobi with the last of my dignity. She paused, and then I ended up on the floor of an airport. Invisible. Jonathan's face tightened, jaw clenched. He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry. Naomi shook her head. I don't need a beautiful apology. I don't need tears or regret or late-night guilt. Then what do you need? He asked. She exhaled. To be seen. Really seen. Not as the help. Not as a mistake you're trying to fix. As a woman. As a mother. As someone you let fall and never once reached for. Jonathan nodded slowly. I see you now. She met his eyes. Then act like it. He looked at her carefully, and for the first time, not through the lens of power or familiarity, but with something closer to humility. Tell me how, he said. Not because I want to be redeemed, but because I don't want to repeat it. Naomi studied him. After a long silence, she said, you could start by telling the truth. To who? To the people who matter. Your wife. Your daughter. Your company. Whoever still believes the lie. That I fired you over a theft you didn't commit? Yes. That I stood by while you were humiliated? Yes. Jonathan leaned back. That would destroy everything. Naomi nodded. Now imagine what it did to me. Silence settled between them again. She stood and walked to the small table, opening the bag and checking the food. Still warm. She pulled out a juice box and tucked it next to the twins, ready for when they woke. Why did you come over here tonight? she asked suddenly. Jonathan looked up. I couldn't sleep. Neither could I. She turned to him. Do you know what the worst part was? She said. It wasn't the cold, or the hunger, or the shame. It was watching people walk by me. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Some looked. Most didn't. But no one stopped. No one asked. I'm sorry I was one of them, he said. You weren't just one of them, she corrected. You were the one who made me invisible in the first place. He didn't try to defend himself. Naomi walked back to her seat and sat down. I don't know what this is, she said, gesturing between them. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. But my children are warm tonight. And that's more than I had yesterday. I'll take that, Jonathan said. Don't, she replied. Don't take anything yet. This isn't grace. It's survival. He nodded. Okay. She stood, walked to the door, and opened it. He got the message. As he stepped into the hallway, she added, if you really want to help, don't make this about you. Don't try to be the savior. He turned back to her. What should I be? She held his gaze. Someone who finally tells the truth. Then she closed the door. Inside, the room fell into silence once more. Naomi stood still for a moment, her hand on the knob, her back against the wood. Then, slowly, she turned and looked at her children, still sleeping. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long time, she had said everything that needed to be said. And he had listened. That was something. Not everything, but something. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the room in golden streaks, illuminating the edges of the curtains and casting long shadows across the carpet. Naomi sat in the armchair by the window, already dressed. She had been awake for hours, staring out at the skyline, watching planes take off one by one. The twins were still sleeping. A tray of breakfast sat untouched beside her. Toast, eggs, a small glass of orange juice. It had been delivered earlier, courtesy of the hotel. She had thanked the staff with a polite nod, but her appetite had not returned. When Jonathan knocked, she didn't move. A second knock followed. She rose, walked to the door, and opened it slowly. He stood there holding a manila folder and 2 cups of coffee. I wasn't sure if you liked cream, he said. I don't, she replied, stepping aside to let him in. He set the cups down carefully. I'm not here to push anything, he said. I just thought we could talk. If you want. She sat, arms crossed. You want to talk? So talk. He reached for the folder, hesitated, then set it aside. No folder first, Naomi said. Talk to me as a person, not a project. He met her gaze and nodded. Last night, you asked what I could do to make this right. No, she corrected. I told you nothing could make it right. I told you to act like you saw me. He nodded again. You said to tell the truth. And have you thought about that? I haven't stopped thinking about it. So, she asked. He looked down at his hands, clasped together tightly. I run a firm. We have hundreds of employees, clients, partners, investors. If I go public with what happened, what I did, it won't just be my name. It'll be a scandal. Naomi watched him, unmoved. It could cost me everything, he said. She leaned forward. It already cost me everything. His mouth opened slightly, but he had no response. Naomi continued. You stood there while your wife accused me. You let it happen. You said nothing. And now you're afraid that speaking up might hurt your image. She shook her head. That's not courage. That's damage control. Jonathan's jaw tightened. This isn't easy for me. It wasn't easy for me either, she said. Losing my job. Sleeping on trains. Watching my kids eat once a day. Being ignored by every person I asked for help. She paused. You're scared of headlines. I was scared of my children not waking up because of the cold. Her words lingered. Jonathan took a slow breath. What do you want me to do? She answered without hesitation. Speak up. Make it public. Tell the truth about what happened. He blinked. You mean, tell the press? I mean everyone. Your company. The board. Your network. Anyone who might still believe that I was fired because I stole something. Anyone who thinks I'm just some nameless, faceless worker who disappeared quietly. Jonathan stared at her. You're asking me to destroy my reputation. I'm asking you to live in the truth, she said. For once. He stood and began to pace. I could issue a private apology. Set up compensation. A fund. I could do something quieter. No, Naomi interrupted. That's not what this is about. This isn't about charity. This isn't about guilt money. She stood too. This is about accountability. Visibility. You don't get to fix this with a check and a handshake behind closed doors. Jonathan stopped pacing. Do you want revenge? I want justice, she said. And I want people like me, immigrants, women of color, mothers trying to survive, to see that sometimes someone who did the hurting actually tells the truth. Publicly, without excuses. Jonathan sat down again. His face had changed. The defensiveness had drained. What remained was something rawer. Stripped. I'm afraid, he said. I know, Naomi said softly. So was I. He looked at her, and for the first time, really saw her. Not just the woman who used to clean his kitchen. Not just the figure on the airport floor. He saw her fire, her steadiness, her clarity, and it shook him. I don't know how to start, he said. Start with your name, Naomi said. Then tell them what you did. She returned to her chair. A long pause followed. Finally, Jonathan opened the manila folder. These are trust documents, he said. For Zuri and Malik. College funds. Health insurance. Irrevocable. No strings attached. Naomi stared at the papers. Why now? He looked toward the bed where the twins still slept, nestled against each other like branches of the same tree. Because I finally saw them, he said. And I saw you. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, you don't need my forgiveness. I know. But if you lie again, or stay silent, you undo everything. I understand. She reached over and took the papers. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of what she was accepting and what she wasn't. This doesn't make us even, she said. I don't want even, he replied. Naomi nodded once, then stood and walked to the door. Do it, she said. Speak the truth. On the record. Jonathan looked up at her. I will. You have a platform, she said. Use it. Not just for me. For the ones who don't get second chances. He nodded. I've already started. And with that, she opened the door. I need to get them ready, she said, glancing at the twins. He didn't argue. As he stepped into the hallway, Naomi called after him. And Jonathan? He turned. If you're going to tell this story, she said, don't make yourself the hero. He nodded once. Then she closed the door behind him. Inside, she looked at her children, the morning light warming their cheeks. She exhaled, not in relief, but in resolve. The video was only 7 minutes long. It was filmed in a plain conference room. White walls, no logos, no branding. Just Jonathan Blake, seated at a table, wearing no tie, no suit jacket. His hands folded, his voice steady. I'm not speaking today as a CEO, he began. I'm speaking as a man who failed to do the right thing. Naomi didn't watch it when it first aired. She heard about it from a neighbor in the Bronx, someone she barely knew, who texted her a link and wrote, Is this the guy you used to work for? It had only been 2 days since their last conversation. 2 days since she told him to tell the truth, or not come back. He hadn't come back. But now, he was everywhere. Within hours, the video had gone viral. Headlines spun in every direction. Jonathan Blake admits wrongful firing of immigrant worker. Blake Industries CEO confesses to cover up. Apology or PR stunt. Internet reacts to Blake's confession. The content of the video was clear, direct. He named Naomi, first and last name. He explained how she had worked in his home for nearly 2 years, how she had been accused of theft without proof, and how he had said nothing while she was fired and humiliated. He admitted to knowing the truth, that the missing necklace had been found in his daughter's room days later, and that no one ever reached out to correct the lie. He spoke of guilt, of complicity, of silence. He did not cry. He did not excuse himself. He said, simply, I was wrong, and I want you to know that. Then he laid out his actions, a public trust established for Naomi's children, scholarships for domestic workers' families, and a full internal audit at his company to ensure immigrant employees were protected and heard. He ended the video by saying, This is not enough, but it's a beginning, and I won't hide behind silence again. The backlash came instantly. Some praised him. Others tore him apart. Too little, too late. Why now? He's just trying to save his brand. At least he spoke up. Most never do. Naomi watched the video 2 days later, after the twins had gone to bed. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just listened. And when it ended, she sat in silence for a long time. The next morning, she went to the community center where she'd started volunteering part-time. It was nothing fancy, just a small basement space with folding chairs and chipped walls, but it served meals on Wednesdays and hosted English classes for immigrant women on Saturdays. When she walked in, 3 women were huddled around a phone, watching the video again. They looked up and saw her. One of them, Mariana, a cleaner from Guatemala, whispered, "Is it true? That's you." Naomi nodded. The room was quiet. Then Mariana reached over and hugged her tight. Another woman, Fatima, said, "You made him speak. You made him see you." Naomi shook her head. "I made him see the truth. What he does with it now, that's up to him." But something shifted that day. Not in Naomi's life directly. She was still living in the same apartment, still navigating job interviews, still buying groceries with careful budgeting. But people looked at her differently. Not with pity, with recognition, like she had stepped out of the shadows and into full visibility. A week after the video, a local news crew reached out, asking for an interview. She declined. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said. "I just want to live." Still, the story spread. More women came to the center. More donors offered support. A law student named Erica asked Naomi if she would be open to helping draft a policy proposal for stronger protections for live-in domestic workers. Naomi said yes, not because she wanted a platform, but because she had something to say. In private, she received letters, emails, messages from women across the country. Some had been nannies, others cleaners. A few had worked in luxury homes, just like hers. All of them said the same thing. "I thought I was alone." One message stood out. It came from a woman in Atlanta. She wrote, "I watched that video and I wept. Not because he apologized, but because for the first time, someone didn't let the lie win." Naomi replied, "I didn't win. I just refused to disappear." That night, she sat on the edge of the twins' bed, brushing back Zuri's curls, watching Malik clutch a worn-out stuffed bear. She had kept them alive, safe, together. That, more than anything, was the victory. She hadn't needed a man to fix it, but she had demanded he tell the truth. And he had, for better or worse. The story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the world now. What they did with it, that wasn't her burden to carry anymore. But what she would do next, that still was. Spring came slowly to New York that year. The wind softened. The sun returned. Trees bloomed in quiet defiance of the winter that had gripped them for too long. Naomi found herself walking more. Each afternoon, after the twins finished school, they took the long way home, past the corner bakery that sometimes gave them leftover pastries, through the park where Malik climbed the same tree every time, along the sidewalk where Zuri would point out cracks in the pavement and invent stories about how they got there. Naomi listened. She nodded. She smiled when they laughed. But more than anything, she watched. Watched them grow. Watched them live. One Thursday, as they walked hand in hand, Zuri looked up and said, "Mommy, can I be a writer when I grow up?" Naomi looked down at her daughter's face. Bright, bold, unafraid. "Of course you can," she said. "But what if people say I can't?" Zuri asked. Naomi stopped walking. She crouched down until they were eye to eye. "Then you tell them," she said, "that your mother already proved them wrong." That night, after the twins were asleep, Naomi sat at the small table in their kitchen. Bills, grocery lists, a flyer from the community center about a new job skills program. She looked over them all, then set them aside. She opened the drawer and pulled out the folder Jonathan had given her weeks earlier. The trust documents were still there. Signed, notarized, real. She hadn't touched the money yet. Not because she didn't need it, but because she was still deciding what it meant. Help wasn't always clean. It came tangled in memory, in pain, in history, but it was there. And now, it was hers to choose what to do with it. She didn't feel grateful, not to him, but she did feel powerful, because for once, the narrative was hers. She closed the folder and returned it to the drawer. She stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights blink like tiny promises. She wasn't interested in fame. She had declined every media request, every podcast invitation, every magazine interview. Some people called her brave. Others said she was a political pawn, a symbol of systemic injustice, a name in a headline. But Naomi didn't want to be anyone's story. She had spent too long being spoken over, assumed about, used. Now, she only wanted to live, to show her children what dignity looked like in action, not just in memory. And dignity, she had come to learn, wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was holding your head high in a crowded room. It was saying no when no was needed. It was walking away without asking for applause. It was knowing the difference between forgiving someone and freeing yourself from them. She had not forgiven Jonathan, but she no longer carried him. He had returned what was taken. That was his burden. She had survived. That was hers. The next morning, Naomi rose early and dressed for work. She had accepted a part-time job at the community center, administrative, but steady. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with accolades. But it paid. And it gave her purpose. She arrived before the doors opened and set up folding chairs in room B. At 9 a.m., the new group arrived, immigrant women, mostly. Some with children. Some with resumes clutched in nervous hands. Some who looked exactly like she had looked once. Invisible. Until someone saw them. Naomi welcomed them in. Showed them where the coffee was. Pointed out the restroom. Smiled gently when they hesitated. She didn't speak about what had happened to her. But when one of the women, a young mother from Haiti, whispered, "Are you the woman from the video?" Naomi nodded once. "Yes," she said. "But I'm also the woman who's here now." That afternoon, as she packed up to leave, a familiar voice stopped her at the door. Jonathan. He stood in the hallway, dressed down. No suit. No briefcase. Just him. She didn't look surprised. "I wanted to let you know," he said. "The board voted to expand the scholarship program. Nationwide." She nodded. "I'm not here for credit," he added. "I just thought you should hear it from me." She studied him for a moment. "You did what I asked," she said. "I did," he replied. "And it changed more than I expected." Naomi nodded again, then opened the door to leave. Before she stepped out, he asked, "Do you forgive me?" She paused, then turned. "No," she said, "but I don't need to." And with that, she walked away. Not with anger, not with pain, but with peace. Outside, the city buzzed with life. The streets moved like rivers of motion and purpose. Naomi joined the current. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had once been silenced and now chose her own voice. Whatever came next, she was ready. Because she had already done the hardest thing. She hadn't just endured. She had risen. And she wasn't invisible anymore.